Hey everyone, welcome back and thank you for being here. This is the start of meditation, the third meditation. I almost called it meditation three. Same thing. Um, this will close the third meditation is the last one we're going to cover, but I don't know if this will be the only video required to cover it. Um, I think it'll take two parts, so I'm kind of planning to stop more consistently around like 40 or 50 minutes, expecting it to take multiple parts. Whereas in the first meditation and the second meditation, I wanted to get those done all in one video because I felt like they were more straightforward. We have a lot going on in the third meditation, quite a bit. It mostly can be summarized as the Cartesian circle. Um, so in the first meditation, we found rational reasons to doubt everything. In the second meditation, we come across cogito ergo sum. Um, I didn't go to the replies, the objections and replies in the last video, like I kind of mentioned in the beginning of the video. Um, I don't think I'm going to do that now either. I don't think I'm going to do that um, I mean, there are meaningful questions in these objections and replies, very similar positions to things I present. Like, for example, the walking argument, Descartes says, basically, he doesn't want to say that just about any gerund can prove that I exist. Um, I mean, so again, by the end of the second meditation, we can trust the world insofar as it is the world. There might be some other world behind it, right? Um, we have no reason to think so, but we also have no guarantee that there's not. Um, this comes from the dreaming doubt. We haven't really found a way to get past that level of doubt yet with even clarity and distinctness. It tells us that this world is given. Uh, it's almost that it doesn't automatically contradict itself otherwise, the way that my own self-reference and the doubting of doubting, or the apperception, any kind of apperception, any kind of reflexive thought or reflexive perception back onto the perception itself, perception of perception, sensation of sensation, etc. Some secondary level that becomes circular. Um, that's basically the ground in perception, that can't be denied that it exists, and it's a move from a single thing into some other kind of understanding, um, which seems to be it's more direct than what it means to think while walking, or to think while playing guitar, or to think while reading, or to think while painting, or to think while talking, or to think while writing poetry. All these are different ways of thinking, different kinds of mind. Um, this is all consistent with what we've discovered in the first and second meditations, as well as with the objections and replies. Um, it's merely that we could be dreaming, meaning there could be some other world. Well, and also that the givenness of these other activities is more extended. It's not as directly self-contradictory to doubt it, um, to doubt the givenness of the wall over there, right? It's not as immediate. There is some mediation as it gets further away. That's what the matter as media, or as medium. Media is plural for medium. So not just like, yeah, again, the media meaning the material through which, or across which, or as which communication or experience happens. Um, According to Descartes, thought is something immediate, but I don't think that's super obvious in the second meditation. Um, the cogito at least should be, the reflexive thought should be immediate. These other things are not really reflexive because perception is not seated at them. That the wall back there is not the place from which the wall's existence or consciousness or being is seated. It's seated from my perspective. Um, Sorry. We're also not screen sharing yet, which is fine. We haven't really done much, but we want to get that up there before I forget. Um, so yeah, I have a whiteboard with the Cartesian circle on it. Um, what is the Cartesian circle? I was recapping the first, second, and third meditations. And the second meditation, again, it's about cogito ergo sum, but with some kind of phenomenological ground there, even without God. And I guess what it is that you might want to, what God does then, God affirms consistency mostly. That even when the givenness is not as obvious as when presently perceiving the reflexive givenness, that it's still trustworthy in there. So the third meditation then starts with Descartes going, or the meditator, us. You good? I'm still babysitting my mom's dog and she started coughing. They're both laying on the bed. Shelby, are you okay? She's kind of coughing. Anyway, the meditator, us, realizing that that we know that we exist, that we know we're a thinking thing, and they recap that for us, and then go on to show, um, they describe it as what is needed to be sure of anything. Um, so what is it like to know something? What is enough for me to know something in the future? Um, And if you're just following the meditations as a sort of like linking up of different perceptions, not perceptions, different words, if it's just words and labels, then clarity and distinctness does seem like a circle. Because if clarity and distinctness is supposed to, first of all, if clarity and distinctness is supposed to ground the cogito as some kind of like other thing that we can trust, other than instead of a self-revealing thing, right? The clarity and distinctness is the final ground. It's self-revealing. So why do you need God? Well, Descartes says to remove the most extreme radical cases of doubt. I don't think this is really what it is. There's a paper by Michael Della Rocca called something like Descartes and the Cartesian Circle without God, epistemic externalism. It's about externalism and yeah, the Cartesian Circle. And he considers a ton of different positions on what Descartes might be trying to accomplish with proving God's existence. If Descartes already can be certain of things prior to God existing, like God, like Descartes or sorry, the meditator can be certain of things. I can be certain of things. Um, or bring it about that two and three added together are more or less than five, or anything of this kind in which I see a manifest contradiction. So it's not just the cogito before proving God's existence. There are other innate ideas that are obviously true, cannot be proven false, could not be deceived, or we could not be wrong about. Um, and it's a faculty of the mind. If not faculty is probably not the right word. It is a felt experience that we can judge for ourselves. Faculty makes it sound like it's some other separate thing inside of a container that you can describe. It's probably not that. It's probably just access to um, the world and sensitivity to the internal feelings that differ from experience to experience. I think Sartre says something like, um, every truth has a eidetic noetic counterpart that happens mentally. So there's like a different idea for each thing in the world or each experience, right? And each idea feels different. And that's how we know things are true, and that's how we distinguish and discern anything. Okay, so let's start with the guiding questions, and then we'll read the synopsis, and then we'll look at some answers to the guiding questions. Doing pretty good on time. We're only at 11 minutes. Um, I guess the other thing to say, we talked about clarity and distinctness a lot. We talked about proving God's existence and this kind of circularity of it. Um, and we started to talk, the other phrase Descartes uses is the natural light. So not just clarity and distinctness, but revealed by the natural light or the light of nature, depending on your translation. Um, these all seem to be the same thing, clarity and distinctness, natural light, and the light of nature. Um, and I think what makes the most sense to me, I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but I think what makes the most sense to me, first off, the circle. So in the first instance, clarity and distinctness is a thing we feel. It's a thing that I understand. It's a quality to the experience which allows me to move forward with it with confidence. I can be convicted by it, um, meaning that I do it with conviction. And that in itself is a way of knowing that it's true. Um, this is also consistent, again, with, like I said, with Descartes. It's actually in this meditation that he says that this would not be enough to make me certain of the truth of the matter if it could ever turn out that something which I perceived with such clarity and distinctness was false. So either I don't think it matters if we make a distinction like this. Like you could make the distinction that it's not something he's experienced by test case, but rather it has to stand up to test cases. It's something, but it's still at first it sounds like he's just decide like just defining it um kind of circularly. He's begging the question. He's just saying my thing is the best thing because it's the best thing, right? Clarity and distinctness is the truest thing because it's always right. Clarity and distinctness is right because it's always right. Like that doesn't that seems circular. Sorry, I repeated myself so much there. I was trying to really emphasize how circular, like find the right way of saying that. Um, that was my critique of it, right? It sounds like he's just defining it as the thing and then plugging it in wherever he needs it. And that's to see it as a text or as an argument rather than as a set of experiences. So if you understand that clarity and distinctness instead as something given in consciousness to a subject, um, most easily recognized with I think therefore I am, or I obviously exist, I can't doubt that I exist. There's a timbre or a quality, a texture to that. I got it. No. Oh, I think I might have. Anyway, there's a gnat or a fly or something. I sometimes like to try to get them out of my hand. Um, there's a timbre or a quality to the mind, the eidetic noetic component, and it's the justifier. It like lets us know it feels right. It feels true. Okay. So I think that he starts with that, and that's given to us whenever we perceive an innate truth. And he goes through God to then prove a sort of categorical set of things like, okay, I know that 2 + 3 = 5. And I know when I look at that, when I perceive that it's true. Um, but if I go mess with geometry for a little bit, how can I still know that I can count on arithmetic? That's one way that I think about it. So he wants to set up, Descartes, as a scholar, wants to set up a system of propositions. Mathematics is the easiest system of propositions to think about here. Um, I just gave you the examples, right? Arithmetic and geometry, algebra, calculus, and these differential equations. Um, all these really different or difficult and different things. Topology, graph theory, um, limits, holes, instantaneous slopes, derivatives, right? How can you hold any concept? How can I form a sentence like this where I reference all of those things as a consistent examples of the argument I'm trying to make? How can I? That's what God does. God allows for the synthesis, more or less, the system of truths, the consistency of the system of truths. And so you can have faith in a more complex, broader thing like that as it keeps moving. That's my resolution to the Cartesian circle. My resolution also involves a callback to henosis in Platonism and Neoplatonism, which is communion with the one or the divine or an experience of truth directly. Um, and so the natural light is God. That's what I put here. So the way that you can know things through clarity and distinctness without needing to justify God's existence is that each time you have clarity and distinctness, you are partaking of God's existence. That's one way to read it. Um, I think that's also consistent with the propositional conclusion in the end. Um, when you have eidetics or phenomenology or conviction, that's all God. That's all the Son. That's henosis. That's uh, enacted truth. It's a form of worship if you are deeply religious. Um, I think regardless of what your faith is, you have a holy text usually. And I don't think that revelation is ever sealed, um, or that we stop learning things. And I would really be sorry and sad to get to a point where I stopped growing and stopped learning. I know that some faiths have in their beliefs that their texts are closed off, cannot be revised. Um, I won't comment on this out of respect and a respect that I may not understand. Um, but I don't adhere to like blind obedience, and I think certain things just do or don't make sense. And I don't think you have to get them from a specific place. And I hope I'm not alienating anybody who has enjoyed learning from me so far. That's not my goal here. Um, cool. So that answers to how does Descartes go from qualitative to categorical justification? Like I was saying in the first instance, is this felt experience of truth. And after proving God's existence and then using God as a ground for the faith of clear and distinct propositions or clear and distinct truths, we can build like systems of knowledge, systems of propositional sentences, sentential knowledge. Probably not restricted to a formal logic because formal logic cannot, as of yet at least, represent the complexity of zonal, multi-directional causal influences and historical influences. I doubt AI will even ever get to that point, um, without some kind of quantum computing, or really consciousness is probably just better at it. Um, so I don't think that I'm not sure that we can. That's the quest for a universal language, is this formal logic or this set of statements like if-then propositions, all X are Y, all children are humans, or all children have parents. Um, that's true. Not um, all humans are animals, not all animals are humans. These are like classic logic things from ancient philosophy. And in the modern period, they were looking for ways to systematize that. And that's really one of the rationalist goals, is that there should be a set of underlying logic. There should be an underlying logic to the order of things, supposedly. That's physics, right? Um, People should be the same way, or something like that. So it's part of what Descartes' going after here, from present to propositional. Leibniz did it too. Spinoza did really well. Leibniz did well too. He's a compatibilist, meaning he wasn't determined by, like, there's a mix of free will and determinism. Um, Descartes' view on freedom is super interesting because God's free to do the right thing. I don't know. I don't remember it super well, but I think it's something like that. Freedom for Descartes is not what you expect. It's I guess it's the empowerment that comes from being healthy. So because God wouldn't or can't do the wrong things, but that doesn't make God unfree. Okay, 22 minutes. Let's put this copy down. Work from the screen. So that benefits y'all. Um, so we still haven't answered the first part. How do I know God exists? There's a massive argument for God's existence in the third meditation. There are actually like three or four of them. We're going to cover one of them in detail. The other ones are kind of still confusing to me. Um, I mean, we'll go over them, but yeah, we'll go over them. I think they parallel the analogy of the sun in the Republic, because they come from the idea I have of God, um, which is the idea of the good. And then that's the first argument, the one we'll cover in depth. The other two arguments are that God was my original cause or my parents' cause or something, all those things back. The world comes from God, and I must have come from God originally. Okay. That's that God is the cause. That's like the second part of the analogy of the sun, where the sun is like growing the flowers. Um, so just like the sun grows the flowers, God is my original cause. It's caused my original growth and continues to let me grow. And then just like the sun lets me see the flower, God continues to create me in every instant. Every instantaneous slope or instantaneous second forward is a new recreation of God sustaining me. This is probably what Descartes meant by concurrence. It's called occasionalism. It doesn't, uh, it's not lingered on or super developed. He expects his readers to know what he's talking about and be familiar with the other conversations at hand in the um in the debate at the time. All right. So before we do like the big argument for God's existence, it's kind of in the middle. What I want to do instead is look at the guiding questions because I've gone over these three on the screen. I've added more. So how do I know God exists and why does it lead to the Cartesian circle? These are the ones I answered in fall 20 a year ago, and this is the third semester I've taught this. Um, so I have more parts to it that I wanted to lay out for y'all. What is the Cartesian circle? We covered that. Um, what is clarity and distinctness? Again, in the text, it's something that shows up at moments as a final justifier, so it seems like a gimme or a cop-out, but it is meant to be personally convincing upon personal reflection if you do it yourself in good faith. What is the difference between objective and formal reality? This is part of the argument for God's existence, the first one. Why must there be at least as much reality in the cause as in the effect? Also, um, part of the argument for God's existence. How does Descartes go from qualitative to categorical justification? We have hopefully covered that part, which is not as much in the text. Um, what is the relationship between henosis and the natural light? Henosis in Neoplatonism is a partaking of communion with God or the good or truth or the absolute, so to speak. And the absolute is necessary and it would be a final ground in itself. It would be um, self-creating even. What's the relationship with that and clarity and distinctness? Well, clarity and distinctness might be our experience of perceiving that, simply enough. And perceiving it is our way of identifying up against it, and also why it's good to do philosophy. Good to reenact the truth in a new dialectic, in a new conversation, as often as long as possible in every life. Do we resolve the Cartesian circle differently if understanding is partaking of God? I think it's part of the resolution. I don't think it's a different resolution. I think it's part of the step through God, why they connect at all. How is rationalism different from empiricism? Let's do that one at the end. We started our unit with it though. So hopefully you kind of know the answer. It's basically like internal ideas versus and principles versus experiments and trial and error and observation. Um, kind of a distinction between like, is the internal the most true or is the external the most true? Is the mind the most real or is matter the most real? And then there are some combination solutions, right? And every rationalist had some empiricism in their theories that they didn't want to admit to, and every empiricist had some rationalism in their theories that they didn't want to admit to. Locke, for example, had to have some kind of, I think it was like a regulatory idea or some kind of category that would then combine different perceptions or observations. It's only when you really blend them into saying like, no, matter presents ideas to me. The eidetics are given in the world. The world gives me the truth of itself. Those kind of blendings are more coherent. Um, with rationalism, there's innate ideas, like we're born with all the ideas that are already true, and we just have to remember them. It's also kind of common in Plato to see that. Plato talks about learning as remembering. And empiricism has the idea or the a key counterpart for that in empiricism is tabula rasa, a blank slate. Each person is born with nothing, and the world writes or impresses or molds or shapes or crafts my mind and my consciousness based on the hits that I take and the impacts that happen to me. They're certainly Kant tried to mix them. Kant was famous for mixing them with the categories. Um, I tend towards the pragmatic and continentalist resolutions, so more monistic, and the Spinozan resolution too. I like Spinoza more than Kant. Anyway, well, more than Kant's in epistemology. I like his ethics. I think his good without qualification makes a lot of sense how you get from that all the way up to the categorical imperative. It has an eidetic truth to it. Of course, and the epistemology is very confusing, so I'll have to revisit it one day. But let's see where we're at. 30 minutes. We'll read um the text from the third meditation for um up until the argument for God's existence, which is like 2 or 3 pages. And then we'll probably break um and come back for part two, and that should be the end of it. And then we'll move on to Mitsumi and Spinoza in our next lecture series. Um, the synopsis. Let's do the synopsis first too. So in the this is Descartes. In the third meditation, I have explained quite fully enough, I think, my principal argument for proving the existence of God. But in order to draw my readers' minds away from the senses as far as possible, I was not willing to use any comparison taken from bodily things. So it may be that many obscurities remain, but I hope they will be completely removed later in my replies to the objections. One such problem, among others, is how the idea of a supremely perfect being, which is in us, possesses so much objective reality that it can come only from a cause which is supremely perfect. Um, Objective reality means that it's the reality that it has as an idea, just in my mind, as a representation, or um, as an object of the mind. And formal reality is the originary being that causes objective reality. In some cases, they are identical. The mind's formal reality is its objective reality, or when I perceive, when I can know that I'm a thinking thing, then I create an objective reality out of the formal reality that I operate as. It's probably like truly impossible to actually flip yourself back onto itself. You could never understand because it wouldn't, you would need some additional space to perceive the totality of the thing. If it filled up the container, there would be no space left to understand itself or do anything else other than experience all of it all at once. The ipseity of it would leave no room for self-reference or reflexivity. The itselfness would not be able to reflect back onto itself because it would be so full. That's why the objective reality of the mind is not this identical to the formal reality of the mind, but the objective reality we get from the cogito ergo sum is enough to prove the formal reality of the thinking thing. Um, and we still utterly depend. We're not, because it's a substance, it's not self-creating according to Descartes. And so we still ultimately depend on God. In Spinoza, though, God is the one substance, and so substance is the self-creating thing. And it seems like in Descartes, um, I think he says something to the contrary. Was it up here? Yeah, first we need to know that absolutely all substances or things which must be created by God in order to exist. So a substance in Descartes is not a substance in Spinoza. A substance in Descartes is more like a mode in Spinoza, and there's mind and matter as modes in Spinoza, but really the multiple or the many is the modal in Spinoza's view. And we'll do that soon. I don't want to jump ahead. Okay. Uh, so One such problem among others is how the idea of a supremely perfect being, which is in us, possesses so much objective reality that it can come only from a cause which is supremely perfect. And this is also because there must be at least as much reality in the cause as in the effect. Nothing, something imperfect cannot make something more perfect. This is just one example I used in the past was playing telephone. So I don't know if anybody's ever played telephone before, but if you pass a phrase as quietly as you can down a line of 30 people or so, it will be messed up in some way, somehow, usually. Uh, it just kind of decays and deteriorates, and that deterioration can cascade in really crazy ways. So if you've never tried it or played it, give it a go if you get the opportunity. But that's just one way of thinking about Descartes' argument for why there must be as much perfection in the causes and the effects, because there's always going to be some randomness introduced in every next encounter. Entropy will continue to happen. Um, and that was part of his doubt. That was part of the case argument for the third doubt, for whether God exists or not, doesn't matter. And that was the, if God doesn't exist, then there's nothing perfect that creating me. And so I'm not very likely to be perfect. Um, amongst other aspects of that argument. And you should revisit the text because it was kind of sticky to see exactly what you think it is. But in the replies, this is illustrated by the comparison of a very perfect machine, the idea of which is in the mind of some engineer. Just as the objective intricacy belonging to the idea must have some cause, namely the scientific knowledge of the engineer, or of someone else who passed the idea on to him, so the idea of God, which is in us, must have God himself as its cause. That's the first argument for God's existence, but it's way more complex. And if you use it for your essay question, uh, you're going to want to make the full argument with objective and formal reality and the different categories of ideas being innate ideas, adventitious ideas, and infinite ideas. So that's where we can move over to that slide now. Um, not that one. This one's a pretty good version of it. We won't really hit this until the next episode, because we need to get through some of the text first. This third meditation is like 11 pages. So it's longer than the other ones. We're going to want to get moving. So you can see in like my copy, I've written all sorts of questions that I was trying to process, criticisms I was thinking about, things that didn't make sense. These come and go as you age, as you reread it, as you think about them, and they don't matter anymore, or they do matter. But it's important to go through them on your own, each person, each time. Oh, that's the other thing about the Kogito. Uh, it announces everybody else's Kogito too. So really what we should say is cogito ergo sum each time for each one. I think therefore I am each time for each one. And my cogito is dependent upon the world and everybody that intersects with me in the world, right? If we share the givenness of the world as part of mind and part of thinking, then that's a very strange thing for how we understand our relations to each other. Uh, this is Sartre mostly, intersubjective cogito. I'm very fond of it. I think he talks about this a lot in existentialism as a humanism. But then the cogito is the ground, and it's also John-Luc Nancy, being singular plural. Although I just couldn't find the phrase each time for each one the way that I remembered it. I remembered somebody using it a lot, and I could never find that. I thought it was Nancy, and I couldn't figure out what text it was in. I haven't had the time to read it all again. It'd be good to get to that in our lecture series is maybe 10 or 15 episodes from now. Some stuff in one of my non-intro classes. We're at 40 minutes. I am going to read some of this before we wrap. We're probably going to go to 50 minutes. Um, Third meditation, the existence of God. I will now shut my eyes, stop my ears, and withdraw all my senses. I will eliminate from my thoughts all images of bodily things, or rather, since this is hardly possible, I will regard all such images as vacuous, false, and worthless. I will converse with myself and scrutinize myself more deeply. And in this way, I will attempt to achieve little by little a more intimate knowledge of myself. I am a thing that thinks. That is, a thing that doubts, affirms, denies, understands a few things, is ignorant of many things, is willing, is unwilling, and also which imagines and has sensory perceptions. For as I have noted before, even though the objects of my sensory experience and imagination may have no existence outside of me, nonetheless, the modes of thinking which I refer to as cases of sensory perception and imagination, insofar as they are simply modes of thinking, do exist within me. Of that I am certain. So yeah, strange picture for what it means to when you're like at this point in the meditations and you meet somebody. Um, and really we don't ever have to leave this point in the meditations. I think that this point makes a lot of sense. In this, after we prove God's existence, of course. In this brief list, I have gone through everything I truly know, or at least everything I have so far discovered that I know. Now I will cast around more carefully to see whether there may be other things within me which I have not yet noticed. I am certain, or I like that he says cast about, cast around. That one always sticks with me. I am certain that I am a thinking thing. Do I not therefore also know what is required for my being certain about anything? In this first item of knowledge, there is simply a clear and distinct perception of what I am asserting. And here's the kind of empirical thing. This would not be enough to make me certain of the truth of the matter if it could ever turn out that something which I perceived with such clarity and distinctness was false. So even though it's a perception of the mind, it's still empirical because it depends on an experience or a set of experiences, a set of mental experiences, but they're still experiences. You still have to go through experiences to have the meditations. It's not just rules and deductions. That's not what rationalism is. It doesn't make sense that way. And I think that's why Descartes has actually been lost to history and an understanding of him. Um, it was never so radical as just a set of deductions in a logical state. Like you could never make a logic of the meditations. Um, so now I seem to be able to lay it down as a general rule that whatever I perceive very clearly and distinctly is true. So why do we need God? That's the question. He says it right there. Two paragraphs in, we have the cogito, and the cogito is clear and distinct, and clarity and distinctness never proves me wrong. 2 plus 3 equals 5, obviously, clearly and distinctly. So I now seem to be able to lay it down as a general rule that whatever I perceive very clearly and distinctly is true. But it's also because he's trying to proceed as a geometer in this very rational way that follows as a deduction or as a logical argument that I said you could never do and why he was lost to history. He's trying to proceed in that way. Um, I don't know. I don't think it works. I I think it works, but I just think it takes us somewhere else than he takes us. But you got to follow the dialectic. Everyone's path is going to be different. Um, yeah, let's go with that. Everyone's path is different. So, yet I previously accepted as wholly certain and evident many things which I afterwards realized were doubtful. What were these? The earth, Sky, stars, and everything else that I apprehended with the senses. So the world. But what was it about them that I perceived clearly? Just that the ideas or thoughts of such things appeared before my mind. Yet even now, I am not denying that these ideas occur within me. There's a nesting, a within and a without that I think is part of his problem, part of the meditator's issue. But there was something else which I used to assert, and which through habitual belief I thought I perceived clearly, although I did not in fact do so. This was that there were things outside me, quote unquote, which were the sources of my ideas and which resembled them in all respects. Going back to that conversation I had with a mentor recently with Casey, permeability makes the most sense, inside and outside, and a porous edge that lets things through. Um, Outside me, which were the sources of my ideas and which resembled them in all respects. Here was my mistake, or at any rate, if my judgment was true, it was not thanks to the strength of my perception. Um, so we are somewhat forced to admit that there is no outside to the self in this view. We can trust the givenness of the wall and books behind me as long as it's not thought of as something separate. But what about when I was considering something very simple and straightforward in arithmetic or geometry? For example, that 2 and 3 added together make 5, and so on. Did I not see at least these things clearly enough to affirm their truth? Indeed, the only reason for my later judgment that they were open to doubt was that it occurred to me that perhaps some God could have given me a nature such that I was deceived even in matters which seemed most evident. Uh, God could have given me a nature such that I was deceived in matters which seemed most evident. Not God is deceiving me. God could have given me a nature which is capable of being utterly deceived at all times. And this does not make God evil or an evil deceiver. It is still God. It is not inconsistent with God's goodness. That was Descartes' original argument. That was the meditator's original argument. So don't reduce it to the evil deceiver again. In the third meditation, this is consistent too. Um, but whenever my preconceived belief in the supreme power of God comes to mind, I cannot but admit that it would be easy for him, if he so desired, to bring it about that I go wrong even in those matters which I think I see utterly clearly with my mind's eye. Yet when I turn to the things, so here he's waffling, here we're waffling. Yet when I turn to the things themselves, which I think I perceive very clearly, I am so convinced by them. That's it. I am so convinced by them. They give me the clarity and distinctness. They are true. I can trust them. They break the doubt. I spontaneously declare, let whoever can do so deceive me. He will never bring it about that I am nothing so long as I continue to think I am something, or make it true at some future time that I have never existed, since it is now true that I exist, or bring it about that 2 and 3 added together are more or less than 5, a mathematical truth, not just an existential one, and not just a first-hand cogito, the other two that he listed, or anything of this kind in which I see a manifest contradiction. So this is the first category of ideas revealed to the mind, innate ideas. So we have really the flow is doubt, cogito ergo sum, I'm a thinking thing, the world is given, clarity and distinctness, innate ideas. And since I have no cause to think that there is a deceiving God, and I do not yet even know for sure whether there is a God at all, any reason for doubt which depends simply on this supposition is a very slight and, so to speak, metaphysical one. But in order to remove even the slight reason for doubt, as soon as the opportunity arises, I must examine whether there is a God, and if there is, whether he can be a deceiver. For if I do not know this, it seems that I can never be quite certain about anything else. Can't form sentences, can't form propositions, can't form sciences, can't form mathematics or disciplines or courses of study, can't trust that I remembered yesterday accurately, can't trust that farming tactics will yield a crop, can't trust that sentences mean what I think they mean, can't trust that wheat is safe to eat, that cereal is safe. Like, I mean, yes, we have clarity and distinctness, but there's way more complex iterations of it that we want to be able to fluidly move through and operate on as faithful, like humans, I guess you could say. And I say faithful because I mean that you run with it in a way once you have God. You practiced it, you've tested it, you've experienced it, you've failed from it, and you just keep moving and improving and iterating with God's. Anyway, with God's guarantee. And so God really takes on like a sort of absolutitude or absoluteness of law. Um, I think that's true for Kant as well. I think God is law in Kant, which we're going to read after Spinoza and Mitsumi. We'll read um, what is enlightenment and grounding for the metaphysics of morals. It's in grounding for the metaphysics of morals that the in itself takes on law itself. And reason too. I haven't read his longer works again, so bear with me, but the introductory stuff will suffice. First, however, considerations of order appear to dictate that I now classify my thoughts into definite kinds. So the innate ideas, adventitious ideas, and invented ideas, and ask which of them can properly be said to be the bearers of truth and falsity. Some of my thoughts are, as it were, the images of things, and it is only in these cases that the term idea is strictly appropriate. So there are thoughts that are not ideas. For example, when I think of a man or a chimera or the sky or an angel or God, so God is an image. Other thoughts I have, uh, other thoughts have various additional forms. Thus, when I will, or am afraid, or affirm, or deny, there is always a particular thing which I take as the object of my thought. But my thought includes something more than the likeness of that thing. Some thoughts in this category are called volitions or emotions, while others are called judgments. There's a lot to unpack there. It's not central to his argument. Um, a lot to contemplate on there. It's not central to his argument for God's existence, and I have a hard time schematizing that and seeing how it fits in with the graph I'm going to show y'all. So I like other schemas better from other thinkers, so I don't really um again, maybe an appendage later I come back and deal with it. Or somebody after me, some student or something. Now, as far as ideas are concerned, provided they are considered solely in themselves, and I do not refer them to anything else, they cannot, strictly speaking, be false. For whether it is a goat or a chimera that I am imagining, it is just as true that I imagine the former as the latter. So things that don't exist in reality, that I've never seen, but that I have as an idea, are true as ideas because they exist as ideas. They are actually there. This makes a lot of sense with how Descartes views heat and cold. He says that cold isn't something you can have the idea of. It's not a real idea because it's the privation of heat, meaning it's the absence of heat. So the negative or the blank space or the white space um, is not a proper idea so much as it's the absence of an idea or the negation of an idea. This is very close to positivism. A couple hundred years later, pretty close to pragmatism too, where it's not worth having sentences or claims that don't map onto. In positivism, they need to map onto true states of affairs in the world, I'm pretty sure. And in pragmatism, they need to produce some course of action that is good for the world. Otherwise, they're not meaningful. They're incoherent. They're they're extra fat you could cut and get the same results. Um, it would be really cool or interesting to kind of maybe think all those things together in a paper about the differences between positivism, pragmatism, and the actuality of Descartes' ideas, or what truth is to be actual, or the relation between actuality and truth, in Descartes, facticity and truth in Descartes. As for the will and the emotions, here too one need not worry about falsity, for even if the things which I desire are wicked or even non-existent, that does not make it any less true that I desire them. Thus, the only remaining thoughts where I must be on my guard against making a mistake are judgments. And the chief and most common mistake which is to be found here consists in my judging that the ideas which are in me resemble or conform to things located outside me. Of course, if I consider just the ideas themselves simply as modes of thought, without referring them to anything else, they could scarcely give me any material for error. He's still going after some outside world. Um, he's still like not letting the world be given. The like having the sensory perceptions and like carving some kind of distinction about like possession or containership instead of it just being. It's just what consciousness is. Like making all these cuts he doesn't need to make. Anyway, we're going to read this next argument as if it's not referring to some kind of other thing that we're not experiencing. It's there, it's part of what we're experiencing. We just don't control everything we experience. We don't control everything that consciousness is. You are not in control, and I'm not either, and I never have been. Um, so we finished that paragraph. This is probably a good time to cut. Oh, we're at an hour. That's gnarly. Among my ideas, some appear to be innate, some to be adventitious, and others to have been invented by me. My understanding of what a thing is, what truth is, and what thought is, seems to derive simply from my own nature. But my hearing a noise, as I do now, or seeing the sun, or feeling the fire, comes from things which are located outside me, or so I have hitherto judged. They are outside of me. This is why I say that not in control. They are outside of me in the sense that I would not will them. Um, or I would not will them immediately. This version of myself would not will them. Stuff like that. Being cold, being hungry, privations. Lastly, sirens, hippogriffs, and the like are my own invention, but perhaps all my ideas may be thought of as adventitious, or they may all be innate, or all made up, for as yet I have not clearly perceived their true origin. But the chief question at this point concerns the ideas which I take to be derived from things existing outside me. What is my reason for thinking that they resemble these things? Nature has apparently taught me to think this, but in addition, I know by experience that these ideas do not depend on my will, and hence that they do not depend simply on me. Frequently, I notice them even when I do not want to. Now, for example, I feel the heat, whether I want to or not. And this is why I think that this sensation or idea of heat comes to me from something other than myself, namely the heat of the fire by which I am sitting. And the most obvious judgment for me to make is that the thing in question transmits to me its own likeness rather than something else. I will now see if these arguments are strong enough. When I say nature taught me to think this, all I mean, this is not the natural light, is that a spontaneous impulse leads me to believe it, not that its truth has been revealed to me by some natural light. So when he says nature leads me to think this, he doesn't, or taught me to think this, he does not say that that's the same as clear and distinct. It's not from clarity and distinctness. So habit is not clear and distinct. We can't just immediately trust all of our ways of doing things that we've come to before now. Although with God, we pretty much do get back to our old habits. Um, Probably for worse. We probably should spend longer without God to fix those. Um, but here we are. Not that its truth has been revealed to me by some natural light. There is a big difference here. Whatever is revealed to me by the natural light, for example, that from the fact that I am doubting it follows that I exist and so on, cannot in any way be open to doubt. This is because there cannot be another faculty. So he does use the word faculty. I really think it's just appropriate to think it's a mode, which is an experience. By mode, I don't mean a capacity that the mind has. I mean a particular path it travels along, with there being an infinity of modes. And with the mode of this beach being different from the mode of that beach. It's the manner of the experience. There cannot be another faculty or mode, both as trustworthy as the natural light and also capable of showing me that such things are not true. But as for my natural impulses, I have often judged in the past that they were pushing me in the wrong direction when it was a question of choosing the good, and I do not see why I should place any greater confidence in them in other matters. Well, Spinoza's response to this is that your natural impulses were the only way for you to learn what was good or bad. And you mistake yourself by thinking that you could have known that it was bad before you failed and learned. We'll read that. It's in our reading on Spinoza. It's in book 3 of the or part 3 of the Ethics. Um, so should not place any greater confidence in them or in other matters. Well, should not place any great confidence in the things we've learned not to do, of course, but learning through failure is perfectly reasonable. It's in fact the only way. Accelerate and fail as fast as you can. Try to do it carefully, safely, without hurting people or anybody or yourself. But yeah. Then again, although these ideas do not depend on my will, it does not follow that they must come from things located outside me. Like I was saying, the mind is not the world. So the world is, or the mind is the world. So it's not outside of you, per se. Just as the impulses which I was speaking of a moment ago seem opposed to my will, um, even though they are within me. So there may be some other faculty not yet fully known to me, which produces these ideas without any assistance from external things. This is, after all, just how I have always thought ideas are produced in me when I am dreaming. And finally, even if these ideas did come from things other than myself, it would not follow that they must resemble those things. Indeed, I think I have often discovered a great disparity between an object and its idea in many cases. For example, there are two different ideas of the sun, which I find within me. This is the perception of the small sun and the mathematical giant sun. One of them, which is acquired, as it were, from the senses, and which is a prime example of an idea which I reckon to come from an external source, makes the sun appear very small. The other idea is based on astronomical reasoning and mathematical calculation. That is, it is derived from certain notions which are innate in me. Um, Notions which were, I think it's actually just proper to say what he's mistaking here is that these were notions that were tested through perceptions. The mathematical components, like the the trigonometry required to triangulate the changing distance, the distance of the sun based on the changing shadows, the times of day, and I don't understand all of the mathematics, but I understand that they required the world and observation in the sort of science, to at the very least, like perceive the eidetics or the essences or the truths or the rationals, the ideas, the rationalism of the world, which is supposedly more true, or is the world itself, is the thinking of the world. That's a good way to put it. That's how the world thinks, the logos of the world. And that's what Derrida calls logos. Uh, Kristeva too, I think. A lot of continental philosophers will talk about logos in this way. It's always been kind of evasive to me. I think Plato also writes about logos. Logos is supposedly like what you release when you write something. So it's thinking active out there in the world. Um, and we think through a world as a world, the environment environs on the mental. That's what the word means. Okay. Anyway, astronomical reasoning. That is, it is derived by certain notions which are innate in me, or else it is constructed by me in some other way, right? So if not, if the notions are innate in me insofar as everything is innate in me, or everything is part of, or the world is continuous with my thinking. Um, that is the innateness or the internality of the wall behind me. Or else it's so constructed by me in some other way, this set of experiences with which I have constructed the world. This is kind of why rationalism is supposed to be different from empiricism, where, and this is why Bergson says that rationalism makes everything the idea, and empiricism makes the self into nothing to where the world is taking over the entire thing. Um, Back to the sun in Descartes or in the Meditator. And this idea shows the sun to be several times larger than the earth. Obviously, both these ideas cannot resemble the sun which exists outside me. And reason persuades me that the idea which seems to have emanated most directly from the sun itself has in fact no resemblance to it at all, that it's small. Instead, it's actually giant, if we were to get closer to it. All these considerations are enough to establish that it is not reliable judgment, but merely some blind impulse that has made me believe up till now that there exist things distinct from myself, which transmit to me ideas or images of themselves through the sense organs or in some other way. Makes sense to me. Kind of what I've been saying. I wasn't trying to be a Cartesian. In fact, I often think I'm not. So, but it sounds like I am. Which is good because I like this reading of Descartes. Um, I haven't committed to anything that I don't think makes sense. I've found certain interpretations that make sense to me. So, we'll pick back up here in the next episode, which will be recorded right after this and uploaded shortly. But it now occurs to me that there is another way of investigating whether some of the ideas of which I possess ideas exist outside me. Um, and this is where we'll pick up objective and formal reality almost immediately, and we'll look at all the different arguments for God's existence. And that should be pretty well self-contained between an episode on clarity and distinctness and the mind, and an episode on God's existence, where you really need both in play at the same time to resolve the Cartesian circle, to know what's at stake here in this meditation, as well as um, a nonlinear solution to it. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Animals are still resting. No cat tax, no dog tax. We're just going to cut it. So I'm going to linger a bit so that there aren't title cards while we're still discussing things because it's like 20 seconds or something. Um, but yeah, it's 9 o'clock and I'm drinking caffeine. So don't do that, kids. It's bad for you. Um, thanks for being here. Have a good evening, good week. Bye. Talk soon.